I don't know if you remember at school, you actually learned about this thing, and it was called the Industrial Revolution. It was a very, very simple thing. It was the idea that from about 1750 to 1800, there was mechanical production, and all of these cool innovations led people to leave farms and to go into towns and to make stuff. And this was a major, major disruption. For the first time, we joined together and we made things for mass consumption. Now, that's what I learned about at school. You know what I didn't learn about at school was the Industrial Revolutions. The next one was the idea of the second Industrial Revolution, where automation or production lines came into play. And guys like Henry Ford took advantage of this, and now they could make things faster and faster. And of course, in this instance, if you were working in the factories from before, you would crap yourself. But it turns out we all survived that. Then we get the third Industrial Revolution, which is computation. So now we have computers. We have all of these things that can process, and they can do the jobs that humans did before. But, you know, we're all still working. You all still have jobs. But now here's the thing. So now all of a sudden, we've decided that now we're coming up to a fourth Industrial Revolution. But we just kind of retrofit these things. You know, we're calling it IR 4.0. And I don't think that this fourth Industrial Revolution is actually going to fall into a category like we've placed it here. I also learned about revolutions in school. So I decided to go online and to have a look at what the definition of a revolution was. Now, there's a couple of them that you can have a look up here. So we've got an overthrow or repudiation of and the thorough replacement of an established government of political system by the people governed. Well, that's not what we're dealing with right now, right? So that's not the kind of revolution we're talking about. Then we have the next one, sociology, a radical and pervasive change in society and the social structure. No, that's not us either. But then we have this one, a sudden, complete or marked change in something. That's the kind of revolution we're discussing with the Industrial Revolution. A sudden, complete, and marked change in something. A thing changed. This is where I want to call bullshit, because there is no sudden event. Right? We have in the fourth Industrial Revolution, we have these ideas of biomechanisms, we have AIs, we have all of these cool things that are changing the world, but nobody's working on a schedule. It's not like the AI guy sitting at his office and he's going to the biotech guys and say, hey, Mike, how are you for Thursday's launch? No, shit's just changing. And as soon as one thing changes, that opens up, there's a thing called infrastructure inversion. It opens up the possibility for a new set of change to happen. Right? We're not going to just be changing things at one set of time. From now on, things are just going to constantly change. Somebody's going to create an innovation that's going to allow something else to happen, that's going to allow something else to happen. Now, we've made the mistake of retrofitting concepts before, right? And I hear it all the time. When we talk about generation theory. This is insane that we keep on justifying this idea that someone is a millennial and they're different. You know why they're different? Because they're younger than you and you forgot what it was like to be young. You know who's a millennial? My father is a millennial. My dad cannot be at a dinner party without checking his Facebook. My dad says that he can't read long books anymore because his attention span has shortened. Why? Because of Facebook and social media and all of these things. We've all become millennials because we all live in a world of computation, and it turns out we're adaptable. We actually can change. That's why you're here. You're here in the room to adapt. We need to understand that people are no longer falling into your buckets and categories. And the more you create these buckets and categories for them, the more damage you're doing to your businesses. Because we're individuals. We live in a phase, in a stage of hyper-individualization. And that's exactly the same as the fourth Industrial Revolution. Nothing is happening on an event anymore. The only time we're going to have an event about disruption, again, is this one. Right? This is an event of disruption. Everything else is happening in real time. One thing is changing. One thing is coming in. One thing is evolving. That's the world we live in right now. The people who are waiting for the fourth Industrial Revolution are like frogs waiting for the water to boil. There's not going to be a revolution. Welcome to the age of industrial evolution. This is where you live right now. You live in an age where there will never be an event again. My third problem is industrial. The changes you're facing now are not about industry. We are facing the second hominal revolution, where our entire humanity is going to change. Right? The first, way back when, we had three types of people struggling to become human. We had the archaics, we had the Cro-Magnon, and we had the Neanderthals. And these people, for like a million years, they had a tool, and it was a hand axe. And they weren't able to change it. Why? Because they didn't have an interface. The interface they needed to evolve, to change the tools they used, was called language. But we hadn't figured out how to communicate with each other. Our communication was too low resolution. So it turns out, if I look at Tom and say, he doesn't know what to do with that. Now all of a sudden we figure out language. And language comes into our brain. That's the first major hominal revolution. We have now become human because we can communicate things. Now look at what we're doing. We're putting chips in our brains that can change things. Right? Think about the changes that means. That means that I can think about a concept today. I'm thinking about how that movie made me feel yesterday. And then you ask me about it, Rich, and I tell you, boom, this is the film. And I beam those feelings to you. High resolution language. That's the change we're facing. And then there's an amazing website, one of my favorites. I know Mike is one of yours as well. It's a website by a guy called Tim Urban. And it's called Wait But Why. If you haven't seen it, and there's only one thing you take away from this presentation, you want to go and visit waitbutwhy.com. And this guy, he published a graph in an article he had on AI. And he spoke about human intellect over time. So we grew and we progressed over time. That's, you can see the green line, that's us growing in intelligence. And then he said, around about the 50s, we started creating machine intelligence. And it started growing as well. And what he says is at some point around 2040 or whatever, we know that we're going to reach singularity. That's the intersection when computers and us are as smart as us. But what he says is, hold on a second. Once they're making themselves smarter, they're just going to carry on making themselves smarter and smarter. And he says the singularity is not the end of something. It's just a brief millisecond moment in time when computers are as smart as us. 1 second later, and they're twice as smart as us. And that's the change we're facing. We are creating what he refers to as artificial superintelligence, an intelligence that we cannot understand. Should we be afraid? Is this something that we should be afraid of? Well, maybe. But it's the same way that if we went back to the first industrial revolution, those people working in the fields back then, to them it must have seemed like an apocalypse. It must have seemed like the end of something. But it wasn't. It was just the end of the thing that they knew before. Right? Because not one single one of those guys was sitting in the field cutting hay. And then the machines came and they're like, shit, what am I going to do? And then the friend turned around to him and said, you could go into social media consulting. Because the idea that that job didn't exist, just like the idea of something beyond the singularity cannot exist for us just yet. But when we start, it will. We will figure out how to survive outside the water that is the world we live in today. Because one of the things that excites me is maybe we won't be able to work in the same way because all the jobs are gone. But maybe jobs won't matter. Remember, we're only working in order to make money to have a life. We're not living in order to work. And maybe these computers change everything altogether. Maybe the AIs allow us actually just to have a good time, to play more games, to build more Lego. We need to remember the words of one of the greatest futurists of all time. I will survive. Right? We'll make this. Because we know we have. Because it turns out we're looking into the future. But a far better predictor of our future is our past. We know that we can survive this because we've done it time and again through disruptions bigger than we are facing now. We will survive this, except that we're going to change, work towards that change, and be ready to pounce when it happens. That's how you're going to change your businesses. Yes, disruption is happening. And yes, we need to be aware of all of these things. We need to know that there's problems faced with AI, and it will change the way we work, and all of these things. But I think most importantly, we need to understand that the real problems are the ones facing us. You know, it amazes me that we still do not give salespeople the respect they deserve. We still put them up, there's no degree a salesman can get. And yet, they're the one group of people that have survived every one of these revolutions we have seen. Because people will still always want to buy something from someone at some point in time. I think everybody in this room needs to be aware of the acorn. Because the acorn is real. But I think, more importantly, you need to beware of the fox. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.